Welcome to our podcast, Navigating the Healing Path with Maggie and Nikki. For the remainder of our first season, we're going to be shifting from discussing some of the foundational building blocks to living an authentic heart-based life into some of the deeper, more nuanced and complex components and practices of really walking and embodying this healing journey. So if these topics interest you or resonate on a deeper level, then we'd be delighted if you stick around for the ride.
And in today's episode, Nikki and I are discussing a bit of the fun and magic that can happen as we begin to broaden our awareness and connection to ourselves. And that's the blessing of receiving signs and synchronicities from our angels, our guides, from spirit or the universe, and even from transitioned loved ones. We also share a bit about some of the fun signs we've personally experienced and our processes for decoding these messages. We hope you enjoy the listen.
So before we jump in, I'm going to invite everybody to drop in.
You beat me to it.
Did I?
You did. I was literally about to be like, all right, and drop it.
And I heard you.
Moment of silence.
Yeah, so wherever you are, whatever you're doing, if you can, if it's safe, please just take a moment, close your eyes, and focus on your breath. And as you breathe, you consciously, with your intention, just bring your awareness down into your heart so you can receive anything that you hear with love. And we do the same, one more. Breathing as a tool, I love it. It's one of my favorites because it gives you time and space to become present. And I feel like that's like the biggest goal, at least for me in life, to experience joy is to be fully present, to be aware, self-aware, to be connected to myself over everything else, to feel my body, to listen to what my body has to say. And for me, it's been interesting as like this whole thing has evolved for me, like looking for the signs and the symbols and synchronicities. It's sort of evolved into just this general self-awareness where if something happens within me, I'm looking at it. My throat has a tickle. Okay. What is that? Am I not expressing something? Do I need some water? I need some vitamins. You know what I mean? Like it's sort of like it becomes a curiosity. And what I've noticed is a lot of times the spiritual symbols, whether it's repeating numbers or a dream or something, tends to support what it is also that I'm looking at.
Definitely. I feel like when I first started this journey, one of the first things that really popped out for me that were coming into my awareness were the repeating numbers, for sure. And I feel like that's a lot of people's kind of first gateway, entryway into experiencing more of the more subtle and even more magical synchronicities that can happen, from song lyrics to spirits, ancestors, family members, past family members coming and dropping in signs. But the numbers, I think, are probably still some of my favorites because they've been there since the beginning. And I feel like it's just like, they're so fun and exciting.
Numbers are everywhere. And it's like, it's math. It's universal. You know, there's a whole movie on it. Like the universal language of math, communicating with like extraterrestrials. I forget what movie it is. Encounters with the Third Kind or something like that. Anyway, yeah, the numbers are one of the first and easiest ones to start to recognize, especially with the repeating numbers or sequential numbers, or just any number that just keeps showing itself. Like for you, you said this morning, 144 has been everywhere. And then what was hilarious as you were talking about it. And I'm like, oh yeah, and that's like 9, which is like one of your magic numbers. And then we're driving, and then all of a sudden there's a driver's license plate. This is had 144 like right there.
Yep.
Like
it was the first 3 numbers of the license plate, like directly in my line of sight. And I was like, that's hilarious. 144. That's the license plates for me have been like the biggest one, where spirit will communicate to me with those. They're so fun. Do you feel like there's because I feel like we both said that the numbers are often like that, not like beginner kind of sign, but I feel like for a lot of people that's one of the first things that they start picking up with the connection between like this realm and the spiritual realm and bringing in messages. Do you feel like there's a next sign usually that will start coming in, or do you feel like it differentiates depending on the person and what their perception and gifts are at that moment in time? You know what I mean?
I feel it's the latter. Pretty much. I feel like the numbers are kind of like the entryway, like the gateway of signs and symbols, you know, because like you'll see like you'll hear a lot of that out there, like 1111, 444, you know, like all of those numbers, 555, like all of that. And those are always talking for me. Like years ago it was 1234. Every day I was seeing 1234 just out of nowhere. Just, oh, look, oh, wow, okay, hello, how you doing? And it's sort of like the test, the litmus for spirit guides. Like, are they paying attention? So it's like once you start to recognize the pattern of connection, because all they're doing is searching for connection. You know, like what's the way that I'm going to get into their consciousness, into their conscious mind? And if you express your gratitude or at least acknowledge them that they're there, they're like, oh yeah, they got it. All right, let's do more of that. You know? And then there's a graduation. Then there's the other thing. And it's sort of like an individuated thing, because I noticed after I moved out here in Los Angeles and I started getting connected to my emotions again, because I was numb forever.
As most of us are.
As hard as I was trying. It was roses started to get my attention, right? And I would just walk to the library in Venice and I would just look at the roses and I'd just be like, oh, and I just smell it, you know, just stop and smell the flowers. Like, this is amazing. So, and then time goes by and I got like a medium reading. I got a reading one time and they're like, do you have a connection to roses? And I'm like, actually, yeah. She mentioned like my grandmother. That's how like she wants to, like how she's visited me. And I never told anybody that, but I would often think of my grandmother when I was stopping at these roses. Aww. And so it was just like all this validation and like confirmation for like my experience. And then songs started to talk to me. Like there were songs throughout like my life here where it's like there was themes, you know, and they would become my anthem or something. And then it was like sort of like strengthening for me. And I do feel like a lot of that was brought in for my consciousness to see, to feel, to like be supported by. And so I think it's like spirit's always going to try things to see if it can get your attention, and whatever you pay attention to and you acknowledge it, you'll get more of that. So it's like, do you have the clairaudience? Can you hear songs or voices that are inside your head, outside your head? Like, how do you perceive? For me, it was always the feeling state. I felt things. I still do feel things very, very deeply. So that was how I felt. Spirit was always guiding me, was my feelings. It was like, oh, but I feel like I need to do this or go there or take this workshop. It's like, it's a feeling.
Intuition?
Yes. That's probably, yeah, that's a big one. I've been told, yes. Yeah. Yeah. And then you work on the other things, like the clairvoyance, the seeing, your third eye. And so you practice with that, and you just, it's a progress. It's a, you know, it's an evolution. Mm-hmm. So for you, you notice the numbers. Yeah.
I do.
And then what was next for you?
Actually, quick side note from what you said, wherever your attention gets kind of grabbed the most, that's where like spirit will send, or angels or divine beings of the Most High, like whoever is getting connected to you, they give you more of that. And that has definitely been my experience, especially when I've spent a lot of time like inside. Both from like the pandemic and just the last few months, I've had a lot of free time, and I've just, I mean, I guess voluntarily stayed inside. But I found that if I'm not going out into the world where normally they would communicate to me with numbers on license plates, they would send a lot of numbers on like the YouTube app or something from like comments or like the number of video views is how they would communicate to me because that's where my attention was getting shifted to. And I just love how spirit, they meet us here wherever we're at. And I love that. And I think that's awesome.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. They'll meet you where you are and pay attention to what you notice.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the biggest things. And that's also the gift of being present is what do you notice? What are you seeing? Whatever it is that you want, just keep looking for that. That's part of the reprogramming of the mind is we're so used to looking at the things that we don't want, the things that aren't working. Well, great, noted. But it would serve us better to look at the things that we are manifesting or creating for ourselves or trying to like experience for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. I don't know where that was going. That was it. End of transmission.
Nice. Well, I guess now that I can answer your original question.
Yeah.
So what was my next?
Yeah.
Kind of?
Like what was the next step for you where you started to really pay attention?
My next step as in what was I starting to do with those numbers or what was like a next sign or synchronicity that I started to experience?
Either. The original question was the second one, but
oh, it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I also like if you feel compelled to mention what you did with the numbers, I think that might be beneficial too. I wouldn't mind hearing that.
Okay. I think I'm still figuring out what to do with the numbers. I've had more intuitive knowing of what certain numbers mean, but I think I now kind of take them on it's 2, 3, 4. I'm going to have to be careful. I'm just going to end up like looking at the numbers on like the laptop screen and getting totally carried away.
It doesn't count then.
I feel like my ego kind of will end up. It has totally done that a lot with the numbers. There was a certain point where when I'm driving, because they started sending more on license plates, then I started doing the thing of looking for them.
I'm scouring now. I'm going to find it.
Yep. And I was like, okay, this is reaching a silly point. I think now what I do with them and where I'm at now, like the steps after that, I feel like both of those questions are going to kind of have the same answer. I feel like I'm in such a phase where I'm really tapping into my solar plexus and my intuition and feeling what is coming up for me, kind of exactly how you mentioned. So with the numbers, I've been tapping more into, well, what is the feeling that I have when I look at a certain number that they send me, and kind of tapping into that and asking myself for that guidance and that answer, or them if I'm confused. But I feel like that's kind of become the next sign and synchronicities for me is just the feelings that come up in my day-to-day life with different experiences. And I feel like that's been kind of more of the telling thing. I don't know if that makes any sense.
I feel like it does, but okay. I also understand you.
Okay. So, that's fair. I feel like it's just like it's from looking at the external stuff. So like the numbers, I haven't had as much like songs speak to me, which is really interesting because I listen to music constantly. And I feel like I've had maybe a couple instances, but I think really, well, the other main synchronicity and like sign besides tapping into my intuition, I feel like I need to explain that more. I don't know how to put it into words, like how that's a sign and how that's a synchronicity.
Your intuition?
But, yeah.
Oh, it's a total game. It's super fun to play with your intuition, especially when you were taught not to trust it, not to trust your feelings, your gut, or anything like that. Mm-hmm. You can absolutely play with yourself. Phrasing, excuse me.
Move on, it's fine. That is not what you meant.
Like I've talked with people about that, and they've like, went to like a casino, and they wanted to play with their intuition and be like, okay, I'm gonna go and I have this much money, and I'm gonna play and see how far I can go and like what sort of magic I can experience. But it's like, if you're intending to do that, it's just a game. Everything should be so playful. Spirit is so playful. They want to delight you. They don't want to send a car crash or have you have an accident or have something terrible happen. But that's usually sort of like the last resort to get your attention from like the place of no return, or just something like, really hard. But when we can tap into the playful side of this work, it's much more enjoyable. It's that spoonful of sugar with the medicine, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, your intuition. How do you grow that? How have you strengthened that as you have been on this journey? I don't think I've actually ever asked you that question.
I'm now it makes sense that you wouldn't ask until now, because I feel like it's now more online than it's ever been in my entire life.
Yeah, I can see that.
Maybe not. No, my intuition has always been online. I've just now been a lot more consciously listening to it and actively following it as a conscious choice. The way that I got there has been a very long-winded journey. I feel like the numbers, and I would also get a lot of digital video messages. Like if I was mindlessly scrolling and I was on like YouTube or something, I feel like spirit would drop in a particular like reader or a spiritual messenger that would drop, even if it was just like a sentence that resonated with me, and I'm like, oh, okay, I needed that message, thank you. So stuff like that. I would also love to have a conversation about deceased family members coming in and visiting, because that has been one of the major signs and synchronicities that I've been having over the last, I guess, kind of since 2020 with one particular family member, if you're down to talk about that later. But in terms of growing my intuition, I started seeing the external signs as I was laying the foundation of meditation and seeing the programs inside of myself, feeling them, honoring them, releasing them, and then moving forward in a more conscious way. The signs and synchronicities just naturally started showing up more and more in the physical. But the funny thing is, I mean, as within, so without. That has just been mirroring what's been going on internally. But at a certain point, the deeper you go into this, I feel like that's when the focus just naturally gets turned inward, to where the signs and synchronicities that I was finding outside, it just started putting more attention as I looked deeper within myself for the answers or like clarity on those signs and synchronicities. This is so weird to explain. I've never explained this verbally in my life. I feel like just the external stuff is really just a mirror for what is going on internally. And so it was like a back and forth of, I would see like a number on a license plate. And then over time, instead of going and Googling, I would put that focus on myself inside. And I'm like, oh, how does the number make me feel? Or what was I just feeling? And that turned into an inward thing. And my intuition would answer. My higher self would answer. And so just more and more, it kind of just became like a back and forth, where it's like a sign and synchronicity externally would ignite something internally. But then there's also, you can do that intuition playing game where it's something internally can end up calling something into the external, like a sign and synchronicity. And it's just like this weird culmination of like back and forth and different phases of whether you're more internal or external. And if you need maybe something external because you're not as aware temporarily of your internal. And I feel like from that, my intuition has just kind of naturally risen more and more as I've, like, just that alone, I feel like is what has built the trust in it.
That was the word that I heard, actually.
Okay, cool. Because I mean, that's what all of it is. It's learning to build a trust with yourself and that you can trust yourself. And that's all that the signs and synchronicities are.
I also like looking for the signs and synchronicities when you're trying something new to show you that this is good. You're on the right path. Keep that going.
Yeah.
Right?
That permission to trust yourself.
Yeah. So I developed a new thought pattern a long time ago. And it was very simple. Just this idea of I am always perfectly on time. Even if I'm late, I'm perfectly on time. This was taught to me by Adrian. And I'm like, I love that, because I used to get so anxious if I was ever late. You know, I want to respect everyone's time and their boundaries. And I would get really upset. I would get so much anxiety if I was running late. And so she helped me untie this by being just like, just have faith that you're always on time. And so I'm just like, okay, well, how does one do that? Right? So I just started telling myself that. That's it. Just period. And so, but what I started to notice eventually is how those things really do line up. So me getting waylaid by my family because I'm trying to go get a haircut, right? They kept me like asking questions and I'm like, okay, this is great. I'm present, I'm handling, but I got to go. So I ended up being like 5-10 minutes late. I would text my hairdresser, hey, I'm running 5-10 minutes. I'm 10 minutes late. She goes, oh, perfect. So is my other client and la, la, la. There's always the synchronicity of timing. And I started just to open myself to the magic of that. And so sometimes I would have a client cancel, we try to have a 24-hour kind of thing. But what I started to notice is that when those things happen, like, oh, my kid got sick or I got injured or something happened, be like, oh, wow, I understand. But then there was always somebody that needed that space more. I would like get them to cancel it. They would cancel the in-person session, but then I get a phone call from somebody who needed me. So I'm just like, oh, no, that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly timed. Like, space was created for this. Mm-hmm. And I just noticed it more and more and more. That's when I learned how to go with the flow, how to be I always trust that I'm exactly where I need to be when I need to be there. And it let so much pressure off of myself.
Oh my God.
It was such a gift that I gave to myself for this reprogramming of, oh man. And now it's just like, no, it's good. I'm flowing. I'm here. I show up where I need to be.
Yeah. That was one of the first things that I think you shared with me. Mm-hmm. Just like a nice little mantra when we started doing our year-long meditation work together. Yeah. And that was also incredibly soothing for me and my nervous system because I've also had a ton of anxiety about being late, but I had a habit. Granted, I'm still not great at it. Time management, I'm not going to lie, is actually a very difficult skill for me. Mm-hmm. But as a perpetually late person who doesn't enjoy being late and know that it's bad, but just can't help it. Sorry, I just got into like a...
like, where'd you go?
No, I just started thinking about like all of the shame that I got from my parents around
being late.
Mainly my mom. That's the program and the fear of being late, which I feel like made me be late because I had so much anxiety about it. That's what made me late, is because I put so much like energy and fear. Like I couldn't help but procrastinate on getting ready because I was afraid of being late.
Mind is so weird.
It's so weird.
It's so weird.
But so for you to tell me that, I remember I would start having so much anxiety around, oh my God, I'm going to be late to our agreed upon meditation time. This is horrible. And when I didn't know you as well, and we hadn't established a very solid foundation of like trust, respect, and understanding, that was something that really freaked me out. But then I started getting so much more calm every single time that it would happen, because you would always say, like, you're always perfectly on time. And today I was like 15 minutes later than we normally would be.
But you were perfectly on time.
Yeah, and
because
you needed
I
that time for yourself.
I did.
And I feel like that's a constant synchronicity that I find that happens with you. Not so much other people, which is fascinating to me.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. Maybe it's just because you are like...
hold this belief.
You hold the belief and you hold the space. And it's okay. For other people, it's just a different boundary. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of my favorites, and that's been very helpful for me as a chronically late person.
Been. Yeah, and I was always perpetually on time. I was always early. Like it's not a problem for me. I actually have really good time management skills, but I'm also really good at procrastinating. Mm-hmm. But for me, it was like being like a people pleaser and wanting to make sure I was being there for others and sacrificing myself for something that I might have needed. Because sometimes nature calls and you have to answer, and things happen. Shit happens, if you will. And so it's just one of the coping mechanisms that I gave to myself to let me off the hook and to have some grace and be like, hey, I needed 10 minutes to myself. I'm here. I'm honoring our commitment and all of that. And the only thing is just communicate. That's it. That's all you got to do. If you're going to be late, let me know.
Yep.
So I could make adjustments or meditate or something. Like, there's always something
For
that
sure.
I can fill in that space with.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's a perfect example of how when we listen to and honor our body and what it's telling us, that opens up a world. I just touched the mic, sorry. As I'm doing this incredible hand gesture to go
so
with this.
expressive.
I'm feeling very like expressive and
You
like
are.
a type of way today. But when we listen more to our bodies and our intuition, but sometimes just a feeling in our body or a need that we have to go take care of, I feel like when we honor that, that just opens up the world to call in a synchronicity for us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of like that back and forth of the internal and the external. That is just like a magical little dance.
It is. I was actually seeing the dance earlier. I love that you said that because it absolutely feels that way.
Mm-hmm.
You go in, you go out. You go in, you go out. You know, and you just make those connections.
I feel like there is kind of like a weird line to walk, especially being earlier on in like the spiritual, developmental, conscious stages, where my mind and ego definitely loves to kind of attach to, you know what? Hydration break. To whoever's listening,
my
drink
gosh.
some water.
Yeah, right now, everyone drink some water.
You know what? Maybe that's just what needed to happen.
Totally. This intermission brought to you by hydration. And if you feel like putting some lemon and a little bit of salt, it's even better. It's cleansing and hydrating.
Shout out H2O. Not sponsored by.
But should be for everyone.
Yep. And I'm actively a fan of.
Couldn't live without it.
Literally. Actually, that totally plays into what my point was going to be. Was that like, I feel
Listen to your body.
Oh, not only that. Well, I was going to say, I feel like there's a point where early on, because I'm still very early on, at least in this lifetime of like the conscious awareness and all of that spiritual development stuff. Mm-hmm. It's only been a few years. Granted, I have many years and lifetimes of of experience. But my ego and my mind has loved to not like latch on to like the signs and synchronicities, but like I said before, there's a point where like they start to look for it, and it becomes almost like this little like addiction where you kind of start making everything like a sign of the synchronicity. So with the water, I'm like, ooh, maybe that's a sign. And I feel like there's a point where just like you can end up
everything is a sign.
Yeah.
We go so extreme.
Yeah.
As humans.
Which I was gonna say, it is, I'm not gonna lie, at least temporarily, it's a fun space to be in. Mm-hmm. But I think it's important to not let it go too far, because I think that can end up detaching yourself from your true intuition.
Right.
If your mind takes a hold of it for a little bit too long.
Right. Which is why when you connect with the sign, you can ask yourself, and that's what you did, that when you go internal, there is a feeling state that accompanies usually the sign, you know? So it's not just everything is always there. Like that's just too much. That's not in balance. That's not how it works, you know? It's good, though, on the other hand, to begin to look for it, because that is actually training your brain to look for new things. So instead of, if you're always focusing on, oh man, people are such bad drivers, people are awful on the road, they're so rude. Like if that's all you're looking at, that's all you're going to see.
Uh-huh.
But if you start to look for like the polite drivers, and you're like, oh, thanks so much for letting me through, and you're like waving, you're like sending love, like look for more of that. Mm-hmm. You look for what it is that you desire to experience more and more. And I feel like as you begin to look and feel for these signs and symbols and synchronicities, that's part of it. And it's a fun game. It is, because not everything is going to be there, but you're just going to feel. That's all. The goal is to feel something.
Yeah. Where
do you feel it? Like, where is your intuition? Like, my intuition, yeah, it's in my gut, but I have this navigation space. So, like, I have my intuition. The intuition, like, knows things. And, I can know where I need to be, or things I want to do, or all of that, or who's good for me and maybe who wouldn't be. But then there's also this navigation, this GPS place, right? And I had to learn over the years how I know to follow myself. And that space is between my heart and my solar plexus. Right? So I want a little heart because I want my love to lead me. And then I have my intuition to guide me. So naturally for me, my navigation is right between those 2 points.
I love that.
But that was something that I developed. And this is like just your permission just to develop your own senses, develop your own connections with your guides, get your own language, you know. When I started like watching the Long Island Medium on television, I loved her. Even if people like have their own opinions about it, like I just think she's genuine and awesome, and I love what she says. She's like every medium is different. And that is very much true. It depends on the individual, your life experiences, the things that you've been through, where your sensitivities are. So it's like you can't learn how to be a psychic or a channel from somebody else. I mean, you can listen, but ultimately you got to figure that out for yourself.
Yeah, 1000%.
Balance is what I'm basically trying to also say with the like when you like look for everything as a sign.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Balance and feel it. That's
the key. That's
Yeah.
1000% the key. I think that's all what
that's life.
No, it literally is. I feel like that's kind of the definition. Oh, that's what I was going to say earlier. But that's the definition of the spiritual journey. It's just coming back in tune with yourself, with your intuition, and learning to trust and listen to that guidance system. And then, boom, you're aligned. Can I share
Please.
that other
Share.
thing that I just remembered? You basically described the law of mirroring. The more that you focus your attention on something, that's more of what you're going to get, because that's where your focus is. Whether that's good or bad, if we want to label things as such, that's like one of the major laws of the universe is the law of mirroring, or as most people are calling it, the law of attraction. Some people like to call it, I think Teal Swan says this. Shout out her. She has some cool information. But she calls it the law of mirroring, which is a more accurate title for my understanding of it. But yeah, that's literally it. Where your attention goes, energy flows.
Indeed. The mirroring, that actually just brings up something not even related to this, but just like the spot it, you got it. Anything that you see out there that you don't like
Yep.
is an unhealed aspect of your own self.
Everybody's a mirror for ourselves.
Everyone is a mirror. All relationships, all of it is a mirror. And it's just how you choose to show up. Which then brings us back to self-awareness and consciousness and how to choose how to be instead of just reacting automatically with the mind programs of, well, you said this. I was taught that if you said that, then I need to meet you like this because this is appropriate. Or you insulted me, therefore I must put you down. Like, it's just like, it's bullshit. It's just, you surrender all control. The illusion of control. That's like so crazy too. Everyone wanting to control everybody else. And clue phone, the only person you can control is you. That's it. Everything else is usually trauma-based to keep you safe. But when we begin to heal and we begin to soothe and make space for ourselves and connect to the higher powers and listen to our own power too, we are so powerful. Our emotions are power. And I feel like through this work, that's a lot of what the guides and your ancestors are there helping you to do, is to connect, to reconnect to the oneness of the universe, yourself as a part of that, and what it is that you bring through, And this is all just part of that healing and connection and being your authentic self. So it should be fun. Have as much fun as you can playing with signs and symbols and,
Yeah, I feel like it's meant to be a game. And you and I, in the car earlier, you even said, like, it's just incredible how cheeky and hilarious and what a sense of humor Spirit can have. So why not, since they're meeting us where we're at, I think it's fun to just meet them sometimes where they're at. Just like play the game and see what things can happen and open yourself up to be like, ooh, how fun could this get? Maybe how far can I push it? Like what can I receive?
Yes. That is the fun part. Finding the joy in it. It makes it so much easier and it's more enjoyable. I love when you're thinking of people and then they call you.
Oh my God.
I love that one.
That one's so fun.
That one's so fun. There's been a day where it happened 3 times in one day for me.
Oh my God. With 3 different people?
Uh-huh.
Whoa.
Uh-huh. Or sometimes like where like I won't hear from people, and then there's this one particular day where everybody calls me.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh, hello. And usually it's because like either I was going through something and now I'm like, ooh, I have some space. And then they're like, hi, can I come? Like, let's talk,
Aw.
you know? And so like, I love those too. The other synchronicities that I really value and appreciate is like when I'm going through when I'm going through something and somebody calls me and they're like, I'm going through something. I'm like, oh my God, me too. And then we get to look at this thing together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we get to support each other in that space. And they're like, oh, I never saw it like that. I'm like, well, I'm so glad you called me because I needed to hear that as well. That's a big thing for me. Like when I am going through something, there's going to be someone who's going to come to me with this thing. And I'm like, oh, is that why I'm going through this right now? Here's how I see it. This is what I've learned how to cope with this. You know?
I feel like the phone calls that I have with my sister are usually like that.
Yeah.
Or we're both, because we'll have like, not like incredibly long spans of time without chatting, but we don't live in the same area. And we're both busy people and don't always love or have the energy for phone calls. But the times that we do end up chatting, it's like we've kind of gone through a very similar thing in the recent past. And then we just get to like talk to each other and support each other. And we always learn something from the other, from those similar kind of like aligned experiences. And I noticed that a lot in our Sunday group too, with the Zoom, our spiritual Zoom that we have with some lovely other ladies, where somebody will go through something through the week. And I'm like, oh my God, I really needed to hear that because same. Or like a few months ago, I just went through that exact same thing. Like, let me drop a piece of information for you that helped me. And they're like, oh my God, like that's incredible. I really needed to hear that. Thank you. It's really beautiful to just get like a sign or a synchronicity from another person. And I feel like that's such a nice way to connect even deeper with
Getting
someone.
that external validation, whether it's from a channel, like a medium or your friend or like anybody like that will just give you that validation. It's so necessary in the beginning because it's a new skill. It's a new thing. It's kind of like having a safety net underneath the tightrope. You know, like I know I can walk across it, but it's just really nice to know that it's there. Someone's like, hey, I like this, you know, and like they validate that. It's really comforting.
Yeah.
Eventually we won't need it. The stronger it gets and the more that we are confident in our abilities. But yeah, I still really love the validations from others and those as we share the synchronicities. I think it's just delightful.
Same. And I feel like that's, funnily enough, usually a good sign that somebody is either important in your life or will be if there's a lot of like synchronicities that happen with them. Yeah. And then that in and of itself becomes a sign. Or the opposite way too. Maybe
so the ones
cut
that
somebody out,
we've been like talking about are pretty, I'm not going to
you're not going to say
not
beginner
basic.
level.
Yeah, it's not basic, but this is like just like ubiquitous. Like this is sort of like everybody has this potential, right? This is sort
like the
of
ground floor kind of
foundation.
standard.
Yeah. What I find interesting is when this starts to get a little more magical and a little more unexplained in our limited human mental capacity. It's happened to me twice where I was in a slight I'm not going to say slight, but I was in conflict with somebody and we're giving each other space basically. And I was kind of feeling myself working on some stuff and giving them space. And this happened like, you know, in different years, but this has happened twice where their phone will call my phone.
I know who this is.
There's 2 of them. Yeah. There's 2 of them. It happened 2 different years, like one last year, one this year, where their phone will call me. And I'm like, and I answer, or I couldn't get to the one, or I'm like, so I called them back and they're like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, you called me. They're like, no, I didn't. And I'm like so confused because I'm not crazy. Like, I don't think my phone rang. Can you just check your phone? And then they looked like, oh my God, my phone called you. Like one, he was outside mowing the lawn and his phone called me. And then this other one, my friend was like, She wasn't even making a, like,
His phone wasn't even in his pocket or
no,
anything. It was
plugged
inside.
in. It was charging in his kitchen while he was outside mowing the lawn. And it was off. Like, it wasn't, the phone wasn't off. I know, my phone just buzzed.
That's hilarious.
I know. But we needed to talk, you know? And we talked. And that was, for me, that was great. Because I'm like, well, Spirit clearly wants us to have a conversation.
Right.
Otherwise, your phone wouldn't have called me. And so, but yeah, this has happened twice where a phone has called me for someone that needs to talk to me, but they wouldn't.
Yeah, that's wild.
So I'm just like, okay, I don't understand. But I'm here for it. I love fucking magic. So yeah, weird things like that can happen.
Yeah. I feel like those types of inexplicable, or like more so inexplicable events have been coming online more for me. And this is where I wanted to talk a little bit about my uncle. Amazing segue. Good work.
Thank you.
But I didn't lose. He's still very much around.
Very much.
Very active in my life. Thank you. Shout out Aaron was his previous life's physical manifested form name. But he
transitioned.
He transitioned back in 2020. And since then, he has been very active in the physical realm and sending me signs and synchronicities. In the beginning, he, along with my grandpa, who died a year or two before my uncle did, my grandfather, he would show up as a white butterfly in my grandma's backyard around I think they're azaleas bushes that he would water. And there was just a little section of plants. So he started to show up as a white butterfly, which I think my grandma was most tuned into before any of us and the rest of the family were starting to catch on. And then my uncle started coming in as a orange monarch. This is how we ended up knowing that it was him, was the monarch would fly the same exact path that my uncle would take.
That your grandpa would take?
No, that my uncle. Well, because my uncle was my grandpa was the white butterfly,
yes,
and my uncle was the orange monarch.
Yes.
So the orange monarch would start taking the path that my uncle used to walk when he would either like go out for a smoke, or he would go out and take care of the duties that my grandpa used to take care of. And I think my sister, myself, and my grandma, my mom also ended up tapping into this. We were like, oh, that's unmistakable. That's the exact same path. And every single time that we would visit my grandmother's house, there would be both of those butterflies, and they would have their same path, which was really cool.
That's very cool.
So that was kind of the beginning signs from my uncle. But then fast forward a few months, I'm living in a new place, and I haven't had a ton of contact with him. But as I started coming more online spiritually and consciously and deepening my awareness, I started noticing a crow that would caw really early in the morning, and it would slowly wake me up to that kind of in-between state of unconscious and conscious. And whenever I would then fully awaken, the cawing would stop, and I would hear the crow fly away from my window. And the first time I had that happen, I was like, oh, that's kind of annoying. It's like 5, 6 in the morning. Like, really? What's up with these crows in this area? I don't know. But then it started happening again, and then again, and it was around the same time. Actually, correct me if I'm wrong. I forget, because I had that experience with you in meditation in my inner landscape. Did I have these few instances with the crows first? And then when I went into meditation, I felt the crow land on my shoulder and I started bawling my eyes out.
Yeah.
Okay. Because
Yeah.
that's why.
You started having the experiences and you weren't sure, but during one of the meditations, you had that.
Okay.
Where it visited you.
And that was the clarification that was him,
Yeah.
right? In that moment?
That was how you figured it out.
Okay. So, okay, great. Thank you.
No problem. I'm also curious, is that also before or after? Did the crow show up before or after you brought his items home that were bequeathed to you?
Oh. I think it was, we hadn't cleared out my grandmother's house yet, which, side note, it just sold.
Oh.
To a very lovely family that my grandma felt intuitively called to give them the offer to.
I love your grandma.
Girl, me too. She is a lovely woman. Shout out Jane.
But I feel like it happened around the same time.
Yeah. I think I had just taken back some of
books.
my uncle's guitars and the books. Mm-hmm. Those were the first things that I took.
Yeah. I remember those things happening around the same time.
Okay.
Which is why we became curious about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, actually, that makes a lot of sense that he would start visiting me at that time. Because we were very bonded over music and guitars. He was a guitar player his entire life. When I was a kid, he bought me, or I think he gifted me one of his older acoustic guitars. And from a very, very early age, I started getting into guitar, and I was like, I don't want to play piano anymore, Mom. I want to be like my uncle and go play guitar. So we always bonded very heavily over that. So when he passed, it took me some time before I felt comfortable to take some of his guitars back to my world for myself, which now I know that he is very grateful that I did, and that it feels like I'm wrapping him in a hug whenever I play them. And that absolutely melts my heart.
There's so many stories I want to ask you to tell about this, but please continue with this story.
Yeah, there have been so many signs. Like, I can't stress enough, this man, previously man, gender isn't real. And the other side.
This beautiful spirit that I am so connected to.
Yeah, and have apparently have had many lives with, I hear, from a wonderful channeler who
Shout out Karen.
The what's her, can we shout out her podcast real quick?
Zento Healing. Well, that's her business, is Zento Healing, but her podcast they're revamping.
Okay. So I shouldn't mention the title.
Unseen Universe.
Okay.
Yeah. Shout out Karen.
She channeled a lot of great information for me from this uncle's spirit. I'll just continue to call him Aaron. Where were we? Sorry.
I'm waiting for when you tell them when he knocked on your window. The evolution of the bird.
Oh, we're right. Okay. So a few times he would wake me up, or the crow. The crow. Yeah, the cawing would wake me up. And then every single time when I was finally fully awake, I would hear it fly away. And so I became really curious. And so I brought it to you one day before our meditation sessions, and we just ended up dropping into our inner landscapes for our meditation. And for some reason, I felt called to go to the other side of my inner landscape that I hadn't spent a ton of time at. But there's this beautiful oak tree and a nice picnic table that just like overlooks a whole bunch of rolling green hills. And there's a river that runs along in the valley of the hills. And I'm sitting on top of the picnic table with my legs, or like my feet resting on the bench part of it. And I'm looking out, and like 10 minutes into this meditation, just sitting in this spot, I have a crow come up behind me and just very gently land on my right shoulder. And I just start crying with no explanation, nothing. It was just an immediate swarm and feeling of, oh, hi, Aaron. And there's no logical explanation for it. It was just an immediate, like, knowing, just getting hit by a brick. Since then, since I became aware of that, he ended up getting a lot more playful. There was one time where the crow landed on, usually it would stand, I don't know if it was the same crow or exactly how energetically all of that works. But there was a wall that separated my house at the time with the neighbor's house. And that's usually where the crow would caw. But there were a couple times from that meditation experience where it sounded like the crow was like on my window or like hanging onto the windowsill. And it started pecking its beak on the window. And I'm like, okay, that's insane. And every single time, and this happened recently when I was on a family trip, the place that we were staying at just also happened to have like a railing outside of my bedroom window. That was pretty much the exact same setup of my previous house. And I heard a bird. I think it was a crow, but it might have been a different type of bird that's up there, land on the railing. And then I swear, and it again was at like the early hours of the morning. And I feel like he knows by now that I am not a morning person. And that
I absolutely know.
He's just doing this to mess with me. But in the wee hours of the morning, I heard a bird pecking at my window. And I'm like, where would you even like perch yourself? And so every single time that I heard the pecking, I would get up out of bed and I would go try to open the window or pull the curtains back or the blinds back. And every single time, that's exactly when the bird would fly away. And I would never see the bird, but it was always in my awareness and I heard it, and every single time it woke me up. And so that was like his first major sign of coming and visiting me. And this has been, I think, like the major, more inexplicable type of synchronicity that I've had, which now the bird has transformed into a lamp that I recently inherited from my grandmother's house, which it belonged to my uncle. And it was in the last room that he was using as a bedroom. And that lamp was there. And it's a touch lamp. So you have like 3 different levels. If you touch it once, it's on a low setting. And because I guess there's not like a wall to perch on by my window now.
In your apartment?
Yeah, now that I'm on a higher story. He's been at very synchronistic times. He has turned the lamp on or has turned it off if it's been on the highest setting. The first time that he did this, it really freaked me out. But I had just inherited and brought home more stuff from my grandmother's house, some of which belonged to him, some of it just within that side of the family. I had brought it home because my grandmother's house is now getting sold. And so all of the stuff from my grandpa and my uncle all had to be moved. So I brought some stuff back, including that lamp. And I started to read a book called Dinner with Buddha. It's the whole breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert with Buddha series. Incredible novel series. I highly recommend. That was actually a major series in my awakening. And each book came at such a specific point in my awakening and this journey. And I feel like I always needed certain nuggets at certain times. Another synchronicity.
Oh, always with that good timing, the divine timing.
Yep. So I was finally reading the last book of the series, Dessert with Buddha, which my grandma loved. She's the one that got me onto the series again. Shout out, Jane. And it was on the second page of that book that was explaining how the author was now at a point where he was selling his family house, and it was time for him to move on. And I swear the sentence was, like, I finally knew that it was time to sell the house and to let go. And my lamp, oh, I'm getting chills. The lamp turned on after I read that sentence. I had to stare at it for like 2 minutes, and I'm like, all right, do I need to grab my sage? Is there a demon? Like, what is happening? And then I felt into it a little bit more, into my intuition. And then I started crying. And I'm like, oh, hi, Aaron. And so since then, he's been communicating to me through the lamp. And it's always around family stuff. With the house, with my grandmother's and their house getting sold, to the session that I had with Karen, where she connected with Aaron and gave me a lot of amazing information that he wanted me to know. The times that after that, when I told my mom the information, is when he visited me on our family trip. The day after, the morning after, I told my mom what he wanted me to tell her. And then last night, I finally got to tell my grandma this information. And last night when I came home and I settled into bed, which is right across, like directly opposite of the lamp, so it's within my line of sight, that same evening, the lamp turned on. And I just know that that's him saying thank you for sending the messages. And it's just his way of saying just thank you. Hello, I'm here. I love you. I guide you.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. And he is very playful.
Mm-hmm.
He turned on the lamp again this morning. I was telling you this earlier, and I'm like, it's a very random time if you're to be turning my lamp on. Like, I wasn't thinking about like anything really specific or serious, and I don't know, but he's just like a very playful.
You
playful
were getting
soul.
ready to come here.
Mm-hmm.
What the hit I had
Oh,
earlier?
whoa, whoa. Okay, I get it. That makes sense.
Yeah, that was, I didn't say it earlier just because I wanted you to tell me your story, but I meant to tell you, but it went away. But now it's like, I feel like he was saying have fun today.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
I
love him so much.
I know you do. And I totally feel that. What I love about this story, about this experience of yours, is it really lovely. It demonstrates how it works. Like you have a loss, you have your grief, right? And when your heart is full of grief, that prevents them from connecting to you because it's shrouded, it's being protected. So the more that you can heal that grief and connect to the joy of the relationship that you had, remembering the good times and smiling over the good times, then there's an opening. And the time of the day is pretty standard. Like spirit is gonna get to you in dreams. So if you dream of someone who's passed, that's them saying hello.
Dreams are huge for signs and synchronicities.
It really is. And so that's like usually the easiest way, or in the early times. Like I'll wake up between 4 and 6 in the morning and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And they're like, think about this number. And I'm like, oh God, okay.
Yeah, between 6 and 6:30, I keep waking up.
Yeah.
So I need to pay attention a little bit more.
And that's all you're looking for. You're not trying to like label or know everything. Just notice the time. Just observe, be curious about it. And learning how to like look for it and being curious about like, why is this bird doing this? And then you ask the question like, what's happening? And then once the feeling comes in and you make the connection between the one who's trying to get your attention and, you know, yourself is like, oh, hello, you know, and then once you acknowledge like when you show up like this, I feel you. And this is the connection that you're looking to make right now. And it just gets stronger and stronger so that once you see the sign, whether it's a butterfly or a bird or anything, it could be even a car, a specific car. It depends on who you are and who they were and your connections.
Right.
But you learn to ask and feel and trust yourself and your intuition and what they're trying, because this is an inside job. This is individual, you know what I mean? So, and you've just done this work admirably, you know.
Oh, thank you.
And it's been so great just watching it, because I remember you coming in like, what, this bird, you know, like, and then it's like, and then how it came into your meditation and how you had such an emotional reaction. That's usually a really big sign right there. Also, if there is a big emotion, if the sign didn't mean anything, you wouldn't feel it.
Right.
Which is why we must learn, why it would be in our highest good to learn how.
Nice reframe.
Thank you. How to feel, how to be connected to our emotions, how to listen to them. What are they trying to tell me? What's my body trying to tell me? You know, this is an information. Our systems are really amazing. We are really powerful beings. And when we learn how to heal and align and balance ourselves and be embodied and connect and listen to spirit, to ourselves, to our gut, to our heart, to all of it, the whole thing, just listen to the whole thing. And you just, you know, and I just think it's really neat. And I'm glad that he's there supporting you along this journey of yours of becoming, Because I think that's also what, they're there for. If it happens to where they don't get to be here for the whole duration, they're going to be cheering you on the other side. And I love how you've been able to connect with someone who you've been so deeply connected to before, and how they still continue to serve you and they get to play with you and just, yeah. And so I think he's going to help really open your channel more and more. I think that's partly what he's there, is to help you identify these things for yourself.
Yeah. I need to take a quick minute to acknowledge and show gratitude to him, because when he died in 2020, that I think was the entire reason. Not the entire reason. I had events leading up to his death. But I know not only for myself, but for my sister, and of course for my grandma and for my mom, his passing was really such an awakening.
Mm-hmm. I heard it.
Heard the train?
The train.
Thank you, train. Heck yeah. Speaking of synchronicities, they're everywhere. If you want them to be. But he really woke me up.
His loss was an impetus for awakening.
Yes. In both me and my sister. And I'm so grateful. The way that he passed didn't feel good at the time. I won't go into it. But if he hadn't passed at that time, I don't think I would be where I am. He's just been, I feel like, the biggest catalyst of change in my life in the best way.
I really understand that. As hard as losing others is, like this is something that I've had to work on. I've experienced a lot of death in my life, coming from a big family and just dozens and dozens of funerals growing up. But as I got older and I became aware of like soul contracts, because like I've had young cousins died. I've had so much, and like I couldn't understand it. But then as I grew and I observed and I detached from being so connected to people and things, I saw how it affected the ones that were left. How terrible things happen. A child loses their parent to cancer, but then that child goes on to study and become a doctor and help cure it in other people. How these things happen, but it changes our path or allows that path to open in front of us. Which is why I think a lot of the whole grieving process is like the loss of people in general just brings that focus back to, are you living? How are you living? If you were gone tomorrow, would you have any regrets? And I feel like sometimes the loss of somebody helps you figure out who you are, and it puts you on a path. And I can see it's hard to say the gift of someone's death. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like that on several layers in this case, from whether somebody is no longer suffering, right? And then just how it affects everyone that's left. So I feel like that's just sort of like my coping mechanism, is to like look for the good things in everything, and like the legacy and what they did for me, and how that I will carry that love. They will always live within my heart, and then just see how they've affected others,
Yeah. I think that was very beautifully said. And I agree. And it's weird to sit here and be like, I'm eternally grateful for my uncle's passing.
That is really weird. I totally get that. It's weird to be there too. Like when you feel that, you're like, no, this loss was terrible. It was the worst thing ever.
I felt kind of guilty when my mom, it was her brother, is obviously still going through so much like guilt and shame and grief and all the things when someone passes that close to you. I feel like my grief period with him was very short. because I instantly felt so connected to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like ever since he's passed, I've been able to tap more so into his infinite love and joy and fun and just like pure delightful energy that he is, which was always his core
Mm-hmm.
in his last physical life, but he faced some real heavy challenges in this life. Ever since he was a teenager, he battled with major depressive disorder. And then he transitioned in his mid-ish, early to mid 50s.
Mm.
So almost his entire life he was
Suffering.
Suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Facing some intense demons, which is why it was weird. I was like, okay, definitely cried a shit ton and grieved, but I feel like I kind of bounced back really fast. And I was like, okay, this is strange. Should I feel bad? Am I coping? Am I lying to myself in order to bypass the grief? And it's like, no, because the grief still comes in waves.
Mhm.
Like just 5 minutes ago,
Yes.
I needed to cry over his death again.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know where I was.
I think it
Going with
more
that, but-
looks at or points at or focuses on your ability to adapt and cope and accept.
Mm.
Because I'm much better. Like I'm okay with death at this point. If I'm done, I'm done. I'm okay. Like I have a contract. We all have a contract. Like I'm not gonna. It's okay. Some are gonna hit harder, but I also am so connected that they're not really gone.
Mm-mm.
Like I can still feel. And I think that's one of the gifts of being sensitive and being so connected and being a channel. Is they're not gone. I can still feel them. Am I mad that I can't physically put my arms around them? Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Maybe a crow will come knocking on your window and you can set up some sort of like net situation. But up to
you. In person. Yeah. But yeah. So I don't believe, which law is that? Energy cannot be created nor destroyed.
Oh, Newt.
Is it law of physics or
Third
something?
law.
Is that the one? I don't know.
I'm not a science brain.
I love science, but don't ask me to be specific. I just conceptually I know things. But anyway, I feel like that's the same.
Mm-hmm.
We came of this earth, we will return to the earth, but our essence, our spirit is still there and it does things because we're all energy. We're energy, spiritual beings having a physical experience. I feel like I do also grieve pretty quickly, but then I'm also still surprised, like when I feel things or like it wants to come out. And it's not as long as it used to be. It's like it gets quicker. But it's also like, I don't know. I'm just always talking to them.
Yeah.
Like they're not really gone. They just are kind of quieter, or they speak to me differently.
It's a very interesting balance of like going between our spirit and our humanness.
Mm-hmm.
That's really because the grief is for the human
Mm-hmm.
aspect of ourselves.
It is.
And our nervous systems need it.
They do. They literally
so
need to
much.
cry.
Yeah.
This is what I learned in like my massage therapy school is like all this healing stuff. When you cry, when you're grieving, your brain is literally rewriting your reality. It's why it's so important to feel it because it's like you need to create a new reality where that person is not there physically anymore. You can't just call them or hang out or do what you used to do.
That makes so much sense.
So crying is a very important part to healing. It's actually, I feel crying takes greater strength than repressing. Showing your emotion and being vulnerable is stronger than anything else because you're brave enough to have those really hard feelings. But that's also where our power is. It's informative. We can transmute that.
I feel like it takes more energy to repress. But it's easier to repress.
It is easier
in
to
the
repress.
society
It
that
takes
we
a
live
lot
in right
to
now.
keep it down.
Yeah.
A lot of distraction, a lot of stuffing, a lot of like denial, a lot of like, oh man, it's easier, but it's not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's where I'm just like I feel like it's easier to do that in the society that we live in because that's how we're raised. Mm-hmm. At least a lot of us. It's not safe or acceptable to be
have
that
feelings.
vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think to our bodies, because our bodies need it and it's so natural, it is easier to cry, but it's just harder to when you're not surrounded by safe people to do so. It's very, very weird, very backwards. But I love that. That makes so much sense that it literally rewires your brain. And repression, that's an active denial of the new reality.
Mm-hmm. And anger and all of those things that you have to get through that you just don't.
Yeah.
It just hurts longer. You're just making it hurt longer.
I love how this topic of signs and synchronicities is really just underneath a whole conversation just about tapping into your own body.
Uh-huh.
And just honoring your emotions. That's been the underlying theme of this whole thing, I think.
Yeah, because it's like you're creating a new reality yourself this way. When you transition and you shift from negative mind thoughts and fear-based thinking to a positive and light and love kind of reality, you need steps and time to make that transition. And listening to yourself and feeling yourself and allowing yourself to connect to the higher powers out there that are there to help guide you and love you and support you along the way. And it's just like, are you willing to do the work to pay attention, to feel the feelings, to get through the other side? Even talking and expressing them are not as helpful as just merely being with them and allowing the feeling to pass. That's really release. You know, like, because you can still like express and be violent, you know, like hit things and like punch walls and stuff like that. And yeah, you're expressing the anger, you're expressing the feeling, but that's not actually getting rid of it. You're not really releasing it. You're just being like, I am angry. Look at this. Bang, bang, bang. You know, but when you allow yourself to just sit with it and feel it, it will go. And then it's done because it's been honored and looked at. It's like, oh, good. I don't have to hold on to that anymore. But yeah, but learning how to trust yourself, learning how to reprogram yourself by looking for the things that you desire more, by connecting to your guides, because that's what they're there for. You know, it's kind of their job. It's what they signed up for. Like, this is a good job. I love you. Come over here. There's a banquet for you.
A banquet.
Right over here. You just got to follow the signs. Follow your heart. Do the things that excite you. And I feel like that's when we can connect to the things that excite us. Spirit is so happy to play in that arena. I don't think they really want to like make bad things happen to get your attention.
No.
You know, I think they would much rather be playful and joyful and cheeky because they really can be. Mm-hmm. Oh man, just some of the things that just happen. It's just like, that's a little weird, but that's super fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I'm actually really excited to whenever I transition out of this life. Although Karen said that I have had the repeating pattern of having really quick turnarounds in between lives because apparently I just have shit to do constantly. But especially with my experience with my uncle, I'm really intrigued and kind of want to just have some more time in between after this life. Just go like visit some people, be cheeky, be funny, be like, hey, you being aware? Just like mess with people. Anywho, it's 2:22.
That's so funny.
On the logic timer. We are getting a little long on this episode. So I'm probably going to start wrapping it up. Of course, we could talk about this forever. As always.
Always.
I mainly want to express gratitude for you and whoever is listening for allowing me to share my story and experience with my uncle. I am very grateful.
It's always an honor to hold space and listen. You have good stories, and I love watching the growth, the deepening of it all. And he's super fun to hear about because it lights you up. Fun. You know what I mean? Like, if it lights you up, it's for you. Nobody else needs to know or care or have anything to say about it. If you connect with your guides or your ancestors in a way that makes you happy, go for it. If people are going to judge you, don't tell them. Keep that to yourself.
Yeah, seriously.
Share with other spiritual people. Like, Karen will talk to me. She goes, Nikki, this crazy thing happened. I can't talk to anybody else. They won't understand. It'll be about, like, connecting to something else or an alien or something. I'm like, sweet. This is awesome. I love hearing this stuff. So, yeah, I love it all. And thank you for sharing. That was really amazing. Very
I'm glad.
Way to practice being vulnerable.
Yeah. Ooh, thanks.
Very nice.
But I am happy to share more of myself and my experiences.
Good. You have a lot
with
to
you and
offer.
people.
You really do. You have a lot to offer. And I think I love watching you because it's like I get to see the progress and then I'm going to tell everybody what the progress is. Because I'm like, you guys have no idea where she started. This is amazing.
Aww.
And she's been so short of a time. And she's, so yeah.
I'm racing. I'm sprinting.
You are. You're doing amazing. You do. I can tell.
Yeah.
I'm here for it. Any way I can.
Thank you. You've been such a service.
Oh, love it. That's what we're here for. So this was great. Thank you so much. This is always fabulous. Next week, we're going to bring on a guest.
Our first guest on the podcast.
Yes, it's our friend Jennifer Campbell. She is an acupuncturist, a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner. She's a healer. She's an animal talker. Like she's
rad.
She's amazing.
She's a real rad Virgo.
She really is. So she's going to talk with us about embodiment and what does that mean?
Ooh. So stay tuned if you guys are interested in that topic for next week. But thank you very, very much for being with us and listening and following us along this journey.
Indeed. Have a beautiful and blessed week, and may all the signs and synchronicities make themselves clear.
Hell yeah. And don't be afraid to trust your intuition and to listen to your body. It's safe. It's okay. You can trust it. And you can trust yourself.
And find a friend who can also talk to you about this.
That is also very helpful.
It's really nice.
But also yourself.
Also yourself. All right, peace out.
Bye.